HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
Today's program is brought to you by our neighbors, Fine and Raw Chocolate, producers of the most delicious bean-to-bar chocolates in Brooklyn. For more information, visit fineandraw.com.
Hi, this is Lisa Held, host of The Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. Each week, I record my show because I'm excited to bring you, our listeners, the most important stories about how your food is produced. At this critical moment in time, stories about how and what we eat are more important than ever. I am so honored to be a part of the HRN community of hosts telling those stories. Whether that means hearing from farmers about using soil health to sequester carbon, giving marginalized groups a voice in the industry, or just bringing people together over a good meal. This year, HRN is celebrating its 10th anniversary, and we need your support to keep food radio going strong for the next decade. Join the HRN community today by becoming a member. Go to heritageradionetwork.org/donate right now. You can even show some love for my show by selecting The Farm Report in the designation drop-down menu. Thanks for listening to HRN. Hello, this is Lisa Held coming to you live from Roberta's in Bushwick, Brooklyn, and you're listening to The Farm Report, a Heritage Radio Network show about the people, processes, and policies that shape how food is produced today. So today I'm here with Stacey Adamando, the editor-in-chief of Saveur magazine. Welcome, Stacey.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. So we're here to talk about the Growers issue, which is a special summer issue of the magazine dedicated to the stories of farmers and their crops. And I want to get into all the different stories that are in the magazine, how they came about, talk a little bit about farming in food media overall. Before we go there, let's give listeners a little bit of background on Saveur. So just in the landscape of food media, Food and Wine, Bon Appetit, what makes Saveur unique?
That's a great question. Well, at Saveur, we tell food stories, but we tell them through a lens of travel and culture. So, rather than just focus on easy recipes or sort of family dinners, which we do have, we give our stories a little bit of a spin and try and give as much kind of context and cultural background as we can about each dish. So I say we do 2 things. One of them is actually tell you where to go in the world to try all of this incredible food and traditional dishes and sort of get to the root of some of the cuisines that, we typically admire from afar. Or we actually teach you how to kind of transport yourself to those places in your own kitchen in cooking the authentic recipes. So it's a really special, it's tough to narrow down on a theme sometimes because there's so many places in the world that we cover. We actually introduced a map into the magazine as of last year. So it's part of our table of contents. So when you open it up, you actually see us plot out everywhere in the world that we were. And it's kind of a way for us to check that we're getting out to as many places as we can can, and hiring writers from, all different countries and to represent their regions and their food. So it's pretty fun.
I was going to ask you that. Do you send writers just all over the world, or do you tend to work with people in different places?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of both, but since I kind of, took the helm as the editorial leader, we sort of really tried to focus on hiring as many people as we could, either local to those places or people that really, really knew, either from growing up there or having family heritage there, or from actually traveling there repeatedly. They really knew that culture like in and out. So we never want to misrepresent a culture. We always want to get the, like, most importantly, most deeply told story that we possibly could. So sometimes it didn't make as much sense for me to say, like, hey, New York-based, food writer, I'm going to send you to this country that you've never been to, and you can tell me a food story. So we really try and work with people who know that culture and its cuisine inside and out, whether that mean, local on the ground there or kind of very, very familiar and have been there before. Right.
Okay. And the growers issue, so is that something that you do every year, or is this the first time?
This is the first one. So, we're 4 issues a year, and they're sort of these nice, like, meaty, kind of almost book-like issues now. So many of them are themed just because it's so fun to kind of, like, take an idea and run with it over that, like, amount of pages and time.
Right.
So we looked at summer and we thought, like, okay, there's so much to celebrate about summer. Is it, like summer cooking? Is it grilling? Is it a part of the world that's like really fun to travel to at this time of year? And then we sort of thought about like what makes summer so great. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to all the abundant food that's grown. And we wait for it all year, and it like makes us feel alive again every time it comes around. And we just thought, let's celebrate the people who are responsible for that and who give us that beautiful gift every year.
Yeah, that's amazing. Isn't that fun? Like, I've been like freaking out. It's like,
I know.
It's such a funny thing, but it's like, that feeling of like, you go to the farmer's market and you see strawberries, you're like, oh my God, strawberries.
I know. It's like the first time
when you live
every
somewhere
time.
Cold. It's just like,
Totally.
so, that change.
And, I love living in a place where there are the seasons. And, I even think that, even in places where the seasons aren't as palpable and aren't as different, there's still a very seasonal, crop and cuisine that kind of come into place in certain times of year. And it's like, there's so much like activity around it in the summer, right? The farmers markets get crowded. Everybody's like cooking and grilling and baking and posting their, photos on Instagram. And it's like this really active, energetic time. And, again, it all kind of comes down to the things that we don't think about that much, which is food coming out of the ground. And it's something that you can't fake and can't shortcut and can't really get in other times of year.
Right. Absolutely. So the issue has a lot of different stories. Like you said, there's a map that shows you, where all over the world these different growers are located. You have stories of saffron farmers, hops farmers in San Diego, sheep growers in Western Pennsylvania. Those are 3 examples of many, many other.
Yeah.
Is there a story that stands out to you that really resonated with you the most?
Gosh, they're all so wonderful. And I really, admired the writers who kind of brought these stories to us and the way that they sort of were able to look at something that seemed small, again, that you see at the grocery store every day and kind of like open up this huge world behind it for us. But I think, one that stands out a lot is Kate Morgan's story on the sheep farming in Appalachia in southern Pennsylvania. Basically, she brought us this story about how this region of southern Pennsylvania is really rediscovering its sheep farming roots in sort of what's been a coal-blighted economy there. So they were a really huge coal mining focused industry, and basically as that started to fade out and die out and we started to turn to, somewhat more sustainable forms of energy, there's been a lot of economic downturn there. And something that the government is sort of working with the locals on and the agriculture boards around there is like, bringing back the skill of sheep farming, because the land is not great for growing many things, right? It's very mountainous, it's rugged, it's got a lot of rocks, and that's just not conducive to growing a lot, but it's perfect for raising sheep. So it's been this beautiful effort by some of the local farmers there to sort of recruit new members and train them and give them classes and, just teach them the skills that they need to kind of perpetuate the sheep farming industry again. And it's really kind of bringing things back to life. New restaurants are opening there, and the chefs are sourcing some of the local lamb and mutton from the farmers. So it's just been this like beautiful full circle kind of slow but positive transformation for that area. And I thought it was just such a great piece for this issue.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite stories that really stood out to me. And for one of the reasons that you mentioned, which was that it really showed this idea of producing food that makes sense for the place, rather than saying like, this is what we want to eat, we're going to try to grow it regardless of the resources available. Totally. Instead, like looking at this place and saying, what can this land provide for us? And it's perfect for sheep, you know? And
it's cool too, because it's sustainable, and it also gives people a little bit something new to kind of investigate from a culinary perspective. Like I think, you're so used to sort of like this similar things that you see at the grocery store, and all of a sudden if lamb is coming back into sort of vogue, I guess, in that area, it's inspiring people, and it gives chefs something to put their muscle behind and their stories behind, and kind of just ties everybody together. Like there's something to talk about, there's something to rally behind, and then there's also something really good to eat.
Right. And the other piece of that story, which you mentioned in the beginning, is that it's about the community. It's not just about the growers. It does talk a lot about the people who are raising the sheep, but it's about kind of the revitalization of that community.
Definitely.
Do you think that Saveur readers are interested in how the production of their food affects the communities it's grown in?
I think anybody who loves food and wants to see, your favorite foods and, international ingredients stay around, like kind of has to be at this point. And I think it is something that sometimes can seem secondary when, you're busy and you're just worried about your grocery list and how to get food on the table or what, exciting thing you're going to cook for the weekend. But I think, once you sort of hear some of these stories and get an inkling of what else there is to learn about it, it kind of just opens up your sense of curiosity. And now all of a sudden you're kind of looking for like, wait, what farm is this that I'm buying from at the farmer's market? Where is this coming from, and what's the story behind it? Is it family owned? Is it a cooperative? There are a lot of sort of wonderful immigrant driven, and refugee driven programs popping up around the country, things like that. So there's so much to learn just from like a carrot that you might buy every week and never think to ask the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Another story that I liked a lot was the one about hop growing outside San Diego. Yeah. There was this tiny tidbit that I just like dog-eared the page. I was like, oh my God, which was that the farmers in the story said that on their specific farm, and they kind of made the point that it was because of their size, or that it doesn't apply to every hop farm, but they said the harvest window for their entire year is 6 hours.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That shocked me so much.
Well, I think it was fun to kind of investigate this. I didn't really know that much about hops, and this writer, Beth Demon, who brought us this story, sort of, introduced us a little bit to the world of domestic hop growing and how it's very, specific to certain regions of the country because it requires certain seasonal changes and changes in temperature. But this farm is one of the sort of smaller, they also grow other things like citrus and avocado, but, they have this small plot of their land dedicated to hops, and they end up sort of just like crowding the space because they grow really, really tall, like dozens of feet into the air. They're suspended on these sort of like wires that help the vines grow up, and it's almost like we described it sort of like walking through a sea of kelp in the ocean, you're just sort of covered by all these green tendrils. So it's a really beautiful story, but one crazy thing about it, right, was the amount of work that goes into it. First of all, the delicacy of these hops and how much each strain kind of brings out these different notes and flavors, which of course makes so much sense when you think about how different certain beers are, but you don't really readily think about it like it comes from the nuances of the hops, And then, these tiny windows that they're able to harvest in. I mean, their acreage, right, is super manageable, so they're able to do it literally in one day, a few hours in an afternoon, and by the end of that day, they're delivering those hops to local craft beer makers. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. makes you really appreciate that beer for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that they say, is sort of the prized way to use them is these wet hop beers, which I'd kind of heard about in passing, but it sounds like, they're just so hard to get your hands on and so special that they actually use those fresh hops right off the vine instead of the dried ones that are more concentrated in flavor. So they're really delicate, and they just it takes more of them to make, a similar amount of beer. So they're really high value and high prize and sort of like rare to get, but they kind of showcase like that real essence and sort of terroir and the flavors of like the particular strain of hops. So it sounds pretty cool. I kind of like want to start stocking them or something.
Yeah, I think they said for the brewers too have a very short window when working with those wet hops. Like they have to they have to do it right away. Like they can't store them, which, so it's like everybody is kind of on this crazy timeline.
Yeah. I think Beth wrote that it's within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
Yeah.
Were there other things like that in the stories in this issue, like, that highlighted challenges faced by growers that surprised you?
Definitely. I mean, some of it's sort of crazy because it's almost like built into the land. We wrote a story about Canary Island wineries, and one island in particular, the island of Lanzarote out there, this is off the coast of Spain. They have this insane backstory where basically volcanic eruption sort of just coated the island in volcanic ash. And when you look at it, I mean, it literally looks like you're standing on like the moon or something like that. There's no possible way anything could grow here because it's just like jet black, sort of rocky soil.
Right.
But they sort of like, by some means of like stumbling upon different things and by others of just like experimenting, sort of came upon this way of growing grapevines that is so unexpected. It's so cool to look at. You'll see the image in the issue. But it's almost like these big craters that they build into the soil, and, these puny little vines grow up from them. But they have, the vines work so hard to produce these grapes, and they get so little water that the flavor is really wonderful. They're really high acid, sort of like lighter bodied wines. And I mean, it's some of the I think some of the most sought after wine by like wine geeks these days. But I mean, just the unlikeliness from looking at the land and the map is like, why did anyone,
why did you try to grow that there?
Yeah, and the yield is so small. It's like, oh my gosh, like a lot of the growers actually have to sort of take on a second job, like in the tourism industry or, catching fish or something to sort of even make a living doing it. But yet they're still dedicated because it's delicious and special and really like specific to that area.
Right. Yeah, that picture is really striking. Of that volcanic soil. And
there are other challenges, like the saffron story that you mentioned is crazy because these families, we specifically spotlight this region of Kashmir called Pampur, and they, there's 19,000 saffron growing families that have been doing it for generations. And all of a sudden, their livelihood is being threatened by drought. So, whether it's brought out by climate change or just weather patterns or whatever's happening, they've had several years of really intense drought. So it's formerly been covered, a field covered in these gorgeous saffron crocuses and, the saffron gold, as they call it, kind of just like amply coming out of the ground, now is sort of like this measly, very, very small percentage that's coming out, and the fields look sort of barren, and it's really sad and strange. And the families are either sort of selling their land to big growers or, industries that are just going to take over and grow other high yield crops there, or they're sort of holding on for dear life and just like hoping for the best. And it's super sad.
Yeah, that story stuck with me because I couldn't figure out what I should do. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, these growers are struggling so much. And I was like, does this mean we should stop buying saffron, or should I buy more saffron? Like, I couldn't figure out like what would help more. Like, is it maybe this crop just isn't something that with the changing climate that is going to be possible for people to grow in the same way it was before, and there should be programs to help growers transition to growing other things.
It's
or
interesting. Yeah.
It's kind of a,
I think for now, I mean, I would say supporting the saffron from that region of India is probably not a bad idea. I mean, these guys are just like really depending on it, and There, I think some of them are just like, it's, as sort of the main character of the story said, it was like, his family's clinging to this legacy, and it's not really just a business. It's sort of like a form of ritual and worship, and a large part of their day and identity. So for them to imagine just switching over to something else is sort of like unbelievable. You know?
I think you see that a lot in our country with dairy, like, the really small dairy farms that just for generations, that's what they've done. And it's so hard in dairy right now. And it is, and people say, well, just switch, do something else. And I mean, it's an economic challenge for one thing, but also there is that sense of like, if that's what your family's been doing for generations.
Definitely.
And, that happens a lot. Okay, well, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the growers issue. We'll be right back.
Today's program is brought to you by our neighbors, Fine and Raw Chocolate. They make bean-to-bar chocolate and confections in HRN's backyard here in Brooklyn. Fine and Raw is committed to sustainably sourcing their cocoa beans directly from organic cocoa farmers. They use minimal processing and stone grinding to accentuate chocolate flavor and aroma. Their chocolate is sweetened exclusively with unrefined coconut sugar, which blends delicious caramel notes into the chocolate. Crafted for chocolate lovers, all of Fine and Raw's bars, truffles, and spreads are 100% plant-based. From creamy bars blended with nut butter to salt-sprinkled dark chocolate, sweet truffle bars to toasty coconut dulce de leche, Fine and Raw is obsessed with creating next-level flavors. Their chocolate hazelnut butter made with the best Oregon hazelnuts is the best thing you could ever eat with a spoon. It begs to be drizzled on ice cream, waffles, strawberries. You get the idea. Above all, Fine and Raw is a community of people dedicated to the idea that chocolate is magic. Visit fineandraw.com for your chocolate fix.
All right, we're back. This is Lisa Held. You're listening to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. I'm here with Stacey Adamando, the editor-in-chief of Savor magazine. We've been talking about the growers issue, which tells the stories of farmers around the world. And the first part of the show, we talked about all the different stories, kind of got into the details of a couple of them. One thing I wanted to ask you more about is something that you wrote in the magazine, which was actually, we kind of started to get into it at the beginning of the episode when we were talking about the excitement of the market. You wrote sort of an ode to sour cherries that was kind of like really highlighting how excited you get by that season when the cherries are available at the New York farmers markets and everyone rushes to enjoy them. It's such a short moment in time.
Yeah. I mean, this is like one of those great sort of like micro seasons that, I mean, first of all, if you blink, you'll miss it. And if you're not like heading to the market every couple of days, you literally will, because people snatch them up right away. But also, I mean, if you weren't like, in the loop about them in the first place, you just might not even really realize that they exist in the region. Mm-hmm. They're sort of like patchy around the country. A lot of them are grown in the Midwest, and then some of Pennsylvania. Michigan's like the big place in their fruit belt. Pennsylvania. There's some in Connecticut and New York, but really like they're very regionally specific, and they're sort of followed by this like cultish band of people who know to look for them at a certain time every year. And if that's not you, you might just like not even realize this whole thing was going on. So I love it.
True, but it's also the idea of eating cyclically, like with what's in season. It's obviously a very old idea, and I think it kind of gets at a lot of solutions to issues we're facing in the food system. But most people don't eat that way now, right? Like you decide what you want to eat on a given day. You go to the grocery store, you buy that. How can we, as in the media, sort of help readers embrace that excitement and eat more seasonally?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple, like 2 weeks ago, my husband came back from the grocery store just on like a routine run, and he was like, I can't take it anymore. Like, I have to go to the farmer's market, because if I walk in and see the same produce all year round,
Right.
I'm just going to lose it. It's like, it's not even that fun, And I get that we can't always all get to like fantastic farmer's markets every week, or, that often, as we have to just do the kind of convenience shopping. But when you kind of break out of that routine, head to the big supermarket and just like pack your cart with the same stuff that you cook every week, it opens up the senses. It's like introducing you, sometimes you have to kind of like look up recipes on how to use something that's new to you. So it's just like, it has this trickle down effect of your whole life, I think, where it's like, ooh, I'm so excited to see this. Then I'm so excited to buy it. Then I'm so excited to, Google or like look in my recipe books to see like what I can make from this. And then it's actually eating it and sort of cherishing it, because it's not going to be there for a while. So it's super fun. And I think we try and do it. I mean, in this issue, clearly, like, we tried to bring up as much as possible that's sort of particular to the summer, but there's one section in particular that we called the market report that was, about these bizarre little things that you find and maybe you pick up and you smell and you're sort of like, what is this? But we're sort of encouraging people to buy those things. Like, instead of a cantaloupe, try this different, sort of oblong, speckly shaped, cantaloupe looking thing that you see, and ask the farmer what it is. Or instead of like grapes, like buy those pretty pearly currants and use those in a recipe, or, serve them on the side of a cheese board. I think it's just kind of having an open mind and being willing to spend maybe a couple extra bucks at the market here and there to experiment and get to know what else is out there.
Yeah. You had Collini in there too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Which is so funny. Someone else I work with mentioned this to me recently. Like, do you know there's a new vegetable? It's like cauliflower and broccolini.
Yeah.
Like,
it's really cool. It's like this gorgeous little like sculptural, like it almost just looks like, like a wand and a cauliflower stalk, like were combined into one or something. Like, it's got these sort of little delicate, crowns that sort of hang and droop a little bit like a weeping willow tree or something. And it's a little bit more thin, so it cooks quickly and is a little bit more tender to eat like in a crudité platter or something. But you'll start seeing it a little bit more. Like, now that I know about it, I'm starting to like find it in grocery stores, and it's a little bit more expensive because it's so specialty, but all you need is like a couple pieces thrown into, like a pasta dish or onto a crudité platter or something, and it's like so special and different. And I don't know, it just makes people kind of say like, oh my gosh, like that's gorgeous, whereas cauliflower doesn't always elicit that same effect.
Have you tasted it?
Yeah, it's great.
Does it have more flavor than cauliflower?
It's actually, I'd say, almost like a more mild cauliflower crown, and then the stalk almost tastes like a fusion between cauliflower and broccoli. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's cool. I like it.
I haven't actually seen it. I'm gonna look for it. Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
And another thing that you wrote in the magazine that I pulled out was this quote from your editor's letter, where you say, "When you look at the world farmer first, you'll find a story behind every bite."
Yeah.
Obviously, I agree with that. This is the Farm Report.
That's your mantra, right? Yeah.
And so we spend lots of time talking to farmers and talking about farming. But, I'm a journalist and I write a lot about farming. And I find that food media rarely looks at the world farmer first.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think, a lot of times, magazines in particular, they're sort of, like the glamorous part faces outward first, right? Like you want to see that gorgeous finished dish. You want to see sort of the most servicey moments. Like, how do I make that? That's the takeaway that a lot of readers kind of skim and look for first. So sometimes telling the story about, naming the farmer by name or talking about their struggle or, what makes their vegetable different or special or unique or difficult, to grow is it takes reading and effort and sort of like a greater indulgence and commitment to, a magazine. So, of course, we love to do that, and that's what we pride ourselves in, and we really want people to like take that time to get behind the story, whether it be, the traditions behind the culture or the particular like home cooks or chefs that we're gleaning all of this knowledge from. But it's, it's a commitment. You have to be curious, and you have to like want to go the extra mile and not just pull out the recipe and get to cooking, but actually take some time to be thoughtful about like, okay, what is worth celebrating about this food? Like, why do I love this dish so much? And those are the questions we try and answer and kind of lead people to. So,
yeah. Do you find that people respond to stories that are more farmer focused?
Well, this issue's been out for a couple of weeks, so I'm definitely hoping so. It'll be on stands through the summer, and I think when you walk by and see the cover of it, it's got this like gorgeous sort of almost like an artwork, created by all these different vegetables and fruits and seasonal stuff, and it's like colorful and compelling, and I think in general, wanting to cook with more produce and beautiful, fresh seasonal ingredients in the summer is a lure. And I think people will, sort of gravitate toward it because of that. But then again, I hope they sort of invest and walk away, knowing that when they walk across a farmer's market stand or, they're wondering which saffron they should buy in the saffron aisle, maybe they're going to think twice and kind of pass along. It's good cocktail party conversation too, to just sort of say like, oh, you made this with saffron? Like, did you know that right now, saffron is kind of having this huge critical moment and might not be around in as much, quantity and sort of like availability as it is right now. Like, I mean, I think it's interesting, so you have to spend a little extra time, and we're hoping that people are happy to do that with us because it was really, really fun to investigate ourselves.
Yeah. And, the saffron story is interesting too, because it's about climate, right? They were facing a drought, and that was a huge challenge. And I wonder if as, climate issues are more and more pressing and people are thinking and learning more about them, if that will kind of stoke a little bit more interest in food production and farming because it's so related to climate change.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think everybody's kind of, as like another season comes and goes and we just all experience these wacky weather patterns and sort of like, what's going to happen this year kind of, nervousness. I think it's getting more and more impossible to ignore that things are changing. You can even see like certain fish patterns are changing, like the migration of certain animals, the time of year that they go, or, the actual destination that they end up at is physically changing around the map right now. And that is unbelievable and crazy. And, if you're from a region where that's happening, it's the most important thing in your life right now because it's completely transforming entire communities and what they eat and what they do for work. But if you're, just kind of used to buying the products from those places too, like you'll notice, upticks in prices or, the shelf being depleted at the store that you normally get something from because it affects us all, in some level of the chain. I think we all can't kind of escape it for long, and we'll be hearing more and more about it.
Perfect. Where can people get their hands on the Growers issue?
Well, we are available where magazines and books are sold, and hopefully we'll be front and center, the bright, pretty cover. You can't miss it.
And are all the stories online as well?
Yeah, we trickle them out online over the course of the time that the issue's on stand. So right now you might not find all the stories online, but you'll definitely be able to access them and cook the recipes from them on saveur.com as the weeks pass.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and share it. I'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.